Welcome to the partnership path in real life. Ever felt the gap between theory and reality? We're here to bridge that. Dive into real stories, real challenges, and real successes from professionals just like you in the partner and channel management world. Each episode is a journey, a lesson from those who've walked the partnership path, faced the challenges, and reaped the rewards. Whether you're a seasoned partner manager or just starting your journey, this is where theory meets practice. Ready to see the real side of partnership? Let's get started.
Well, good morning and welcome to the show, Michael. I'm so glad that you agreed to join us on this podcast. Let me first let you introduce yourself to the listeners. Tell us a little bit about who you are and how long you've been working with partners.
Sure. Hi, John, and thank you so much for the opportunity to talk with you about these really important topics. I've really been working in partnership, building partnerships, forming partnerships for the entirety of my career, which is approaching 30 years, which is hard to imagine that it's been that long, but really starting from the beginnings when I was an Army officer all the way through now, it's really been that's been my focus, and how to help organizations and build structures so that organizations can work better together. So this is a topic I'm excited to talk about for sure.
Yeah, that's I didn't realize that about your background, Michael. That's I'm going to want to dig into that a little bit with you over as we talk about some of this, because I would imagine that means you've seen a lot of different partner types, partner sizes, partner engagements over your career.
Yeah, 100%. That's for sure. So
yeah, excellent. All right, well, let's start with this companion episode is really about kind of getting some feedback and some pragmatic advice for people based on the episode that we just did on kind of asking the question why, like why are we partnering at all? And so let me just start by asking you, when you listen to that episode, what's your initial reaction? Kind of how does that hit with you? And how does that sort of apply to how you think about partnering?
Well, one, I think, it's foundational, I think, for any partnership to sort of be able to define in a shared way that both sides understand. And there's a lot of words in that phrase that are doing a lot of work, I think, meaning, when you talk about what the goals, how do you set joint goals that you want to achieve? And how do you set a joint mission for what you'd like to achieve in the partnership? And I think a lot of times, depending on the companies that are involved and depending on the size of those companies, and even just how, making sure that you're really explicit about those things can be important. Because one of the things that I've found over the years is sometimes you'll be assigned a partnership to look after, and the process to sort of determine whether or not that partner should be managed by your company or not may or may not have been vetted very thoroughly. So the partner comes into the conversation with an understanding of what it means to partner. What we mean here at Microsoft when we say sort of capital P partner might be different than what somebody else means. And so being really explicit about defining what that is and the language that you use, and I should say both explicit and repetitive, those are really important, because sometimes you may say, hey, this is what it means. But, sometimes people don't often, even in the usage, even in that description, it can lead to sort of all sorts of questions. And so, all those things are really important with in sort of driving clarity, I guess, is what I would say.
Yeah, that I love what you just said there, in particular about kind of, I'm going to paraphrase a little bit that what got people to the table with you isn't always the same reason that they want to stay at the table with you. Right? Like they may come in with one perspective, and then you've got to remind them, hey, look, here's why we're here, and here's how we think about partnering. Does that still work for you? Right? I mean, because things change, and I think from my experience, probably a more accurate way to say that is people change. Right? That sometimes the person sitting across from the table from you, when you get to that point, isn't the same one who wants to do the partnership. Right?
100%.
Yeah.
No, I think that's a great point. And making sure that you have that try to have as clear a conversation as you can about what is meant by when we say partner. And as part of that, it's describing kind of what you mean. And then it's also then going through the process of explaining, hey, this is what you can expect from us. These are what we're going to expect from you in terms of, and it's obligations really that are going in both directions. And to your point, if the early conversation happened with other stakeholders, you then have to go through that, which in some cases can involve almost maybe a new negotiation of sorts anyway. It's not quite as an explicit a negotiation, but there certainly is some back and forth and gives and gets around how do you make sure that everybody understands what needs to be done. Because in some cases, and again, as a larger company, there are programs that we are looking for our teams or our partners to sort of align against. And that can take,
sure,
that can, result in sort of additional work or extra effort that maybe wasn't being contemplated. And so just the details, as I always say, there's always a lot of details that you really have to get aligned against. So that's the way to think about that.
Well, look, you said earlier that you've been doing this for a really long time. So when you think back, give us, well, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, Michael.
Sure.
I don't know if you can come up with one of these right away, but, do you have an example when you think back in your career of a time when you didn't do it right, where you weren't as explicit as you could have been, and what happened?
Well, probably going back a few years, certainly, and I sort of alluded to this case, is we had a partner come into our portfolio that needed to be looked after. And typically our model is to, once you're added to our partner portfolio and our part of the business here, you're part of that for a period of time. And it's not the process to sort of join or to leave is just goes through a lot. It has a number of steps on our side for all sorts of reasons.
Sure.
And so that had happened. And I think it goes back to that alignment with what was expected, what the other company was intending to do, which wasn't necessarily aligned to becoming an ISV partner of Microsoft. It was really, they had some clear goals and objectives that could be accomplished in a partnership, but maybe not as necessarily as what we would characterize as an ISV. And so you start from the point where once you realize that, it's hard to sort of course correct off of that. You can try to make some efforts to do that, but really it was, without getting into really any details about it, once you recognize, it takes it can take a number of conversations that happen often over the course of weeks, if not months. So when you reach the conclusion that, actually this isn't a great fit. And so, but at that point, you're still having to sort of, find ways to work together to sort of, to the extent that you can, advance your goals. And so from the outset, you're sort of in this place of trying to discover what the alignment is, realizing there is really a misalignment. And then it becomes a bit challenging at that point, because now how do you decide how to spend time on that going forward? Or can you find ways to support what was the desired outcome for the partner in other parts of the business? And that's kind of how we ended up shifting and trying to support the other conversations that they were really looking for. And some of that comes from the fact that, when you hear the word partner, it can mean a lot of different things. Even inside of Microsoft, we have many categories of partners. And so, ensuring that all of the stakeholders have a clear understanding of what this partner type means and where do they belong can be, it's not always a straightforward conversation or answer, I guess.
No. And to your point, it just takes effort. Like, you can't ever make those assumptions, right? You can't assume when you sit down that they're super clear on what it looks like, and that you're even super clear on what it looks like. You've got to vocalize that. So let me give you the alternative. I asked you to start with a negative. Now let me give you the opportunity to talk a little bit about, like, how do you do it? Like, let's get super pragmatic. Let's think about if you've got somebody listening right now who's brand new to partner management, or maybe they've been in partner management for a while, but they've never really thought or been disciplined about how they answer that why question. Like, what's this partnership really about? What's your advice to them? What do you tell them to do? Like, what is it? Is it a phone call? Is it a meeting? Is it an agenda item? Like, how pragmatically, what do they really do?
So for me, and I have a new partner this year, actually. So it's it's an exercise that we've been going through, and they are familiar with our motion that we have here, but they're shifting a little bit this year in terms of how they were managed in the past versus going forward.
Okay.
So the way I tend to start is to really make sure that you do have a conversation about, with the goal, the end goal of that conversation is really, which might be a series of conversations again, but really is to get to sort of, some alignment with in terms of, here's what our expectations of this partnership, if we look ahead in 2 years or 3 years or 5 years, what it might look like. And if you can sort of, if you will, almost a shared vision, or at least talk about a vision so that you can sort of align against that. And if you can align against that to say, I think our North Star for this partnership is this. And if you're aligned against that, that's always a really good place to start, because then you can sort of fall back from there and say, okay, we believe we want to get to that point together. So then you can start having the conversation about how you're going to do that, which gives you some sense of what would do you want to develop a joint mission statement, for example, or whatever the sort of vernacular is inside of your organization. Do you want to, that then opens up the opportunity for you to have the conversation around what the shared kind of objectives are. It allows you to align against your kind of the periods against which you're going to measure those objectives. You may have a quarterly plan or an annual plan, but it all starts from that sort of that North Star vision of what do you think you want to achieve. And if you can get alignment across there, it makes some of the other items align pretty nicely. Generally speaking, it's still, each one of those steps requires a lot of work and effort, but at least you're starting from a good point. And so that's always a great place to start, at least from my experience.
Yeah, that's super, Michael. I love that. And your point too of that it takes work to keep that alignment, right? That you can't, it's not like you get to just say, hey, we all sat down at the table and everybody agreed, and so everything's wonderful now forever, right? Things always kind of get a little bit out of alignment over time if you're not really paying attention to it. So I super appreciate that. Well, look, Michael, our whole intent of these little episodes is to keep them a little bit short and just kind of give a couple of good pointers. So let me give you one last opportunity. Anything else you want to say to our listening community to kind of keep them focused on asking that why are we even partnering question?
Yeah. For me, I guess what's really important, and this always can get lost in the day-to-day, but just it's taking the time to think about these topics, to think about what is it that we're trying to individually, so that you can, and so that that will feed into those conversations you want to have with your partner, and being intentional about spending that time to sort of think through on your own and with your partner about what it is that you're trying to achieve. Are you measuring the right things? Are we measuring on the right time horizons? Right. But you have to be intentional, because if you don't do that, the day-to-day of weekly reviews or monthly reviews or quarterly reviews will take over. And before you know it, you're often directionally maybe not where you wanted to head. And now you've got to try to course correct. Whereas if you're thinking intentionally, it can really help you and it can be a real advantage.
Yeah, I love that, Michael. Hey, listen, thank you so much for taking the time to come on our podcast today and share a little bit of your wisdom. Someone like you who's been doing this for as long as you have, man, you're somebody I want to have back again. So I hope you're open to me contacting you again, maybe, and seeing if you'd be willing to come back and talk about another topic another time.
Thanks, John. It was a real pleasure to be here with you, and I'm happy to come back at any time. So thanks. Have a great day.
Thanks, Michael. You too.
Thank you for joining us on the partnership path in real life today. Remember, the real world tests theories and creates leaders. Don't stop here. Subscribe, learn, and grow with us. Let's make every experience count. Until our next real life story.